Even though the Chevy Cruze is not a Volkswagen Golf, it certainly looks like Chevy did a good job copying Volkswagen's homework. This, of course, is the Chevrolet Cruze Hatchback. This is the Premiere trim. It's top of the line. Actually, I would call the Chevy Cruze Hatchback the poor man's GTI. And that's because while this may only have a 1.4 liter engine, it scoots along and handles just like a GTI. Actually, I think it handles a little better than a GTI. You see, on paper, the GTI costs $27,515 as tested. That was the 2016 GTI S that I had a couple months ago. Now, while this was a bone stock GTI, this is a fully loaded Premiere, relatively fully loaded. I'll get to that in a second. This one costs $26,870 as tested. What's interesting between the Golf and the Cruze Hatchback is that they're very similar yet very different at the same time. For instance, I have rear heated seats in this Cruze, but I don't get them in the Golf. And I have a regular automatic rather than a DSG, but I can't get a manual on the Premiere. So basically what I'm getting to is, if you want a Golf, get a Golf. If you want a Cruze, get a Cruze. But if you're kind of on the fence and don't know if you want to spend that much, or you want more fuel efficiency, or maybe you think the Cruze is too slow because it's only a 1.4, this is what I'm here to do right now, is kind of dispel some myths for you and help you understand the differences. Do I like the Cruze Hatchback Premiere? Yes, but not in this trim, because I had two hatchbacks this week. The first one delivered actually had a problem with it because it had some armpit odor from the mommy blocker who had it before me, and it was clear the problem was here. You see, I don't have an adjustable seatbelt height like I do in the Golf. So whoever drove the previous Cruze Hatchback that I had drove it like this. They put their armpit over the seatbelt. So when I got in, I had to smell their armpit odor. So what I did was I rolled down the windows. And then, of course, that meant dog hair was swirling around in the cabin. And that was really unfortunate. I had to send it back. It was just filthy and disgusting and just aggravating, because that one had the sun and sound package, which included a sunroof and the Bose stereo with GPS navigation. And I highly recommend that package. What I don't recommend is the RS package, because that's about $1,000 and all it does is change your bumpers. It's not worth it. What I find interesting is that while I've had this car for relatively a week, I can't find understeer or oversteer in this thing. It just grips and handles better than a GTI. Now, of course, the GTI, I've always said, has had a problem putting its power down. And this kind of does too, but at least it's not as bad as the GTI. But I can take corners at 20 miles an hour in my neighborhood, and it's working it out. It's not even making a big deal out of it. And this is where I'd rather have this over a GTI, because it costs less, it has more features, and it's a lot easier to drive hard. And who doesn't want to thrash a car in traffic? So if you're a commuter, this is the ultimate car, because you're constantly redlining it. You're constantly, once you get past 4,000 RPM, the turbo kicks in full time. This thing just hauls. Okay, so watch this guy. Floored. Bye-bye. And I'm on the dark side of the moon. I don't like passing trucks on the right, but he's been there for like 20 miles. The only complaint I have is the seats don't have lumbar support. What am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about everything the Golf has versus the Cruze. I can do that. Now, in comparison to the Golf, the Cruze actually has an automatic start-stop feature, so when you get to a red light or a stop and you put your foot down on the brake hard, the engine will turn off, and then when you take your foot off the brake, the engine turns back on. Now, that's what a lot of cars do these days, but this one doesn't have a defeat for that, so it's on or off on its will. And that may sound like a bad thing, but keep in mind, the way this car does it, there's no lag, there's no delay between the time you take your foot off the brake and the time you put your foot on the gas pedal. They've done something really cool with that start-stop technology where you really aren't wasting away fuel at the red light. Some red lights last up to 3 minutes these days. So the air conditioning still works, everything still works, but the way it accelerates and the way it turns off and turns on, you don't even notice it. There you go. You probably didn't even notice it, but the engine just shut off. I went to a complete stop. The engine shuts off. You only hear it. You don't feel it. And I'm going to start it up. Ready? 3, 2. Good job, Chevy. Now I have an optional automatic climate control in here, which is really necessary. You just set it and forget it. It has auto recirc, and basically with the remote starting, this thing will actually turn on the heated seats and get the car up temperature. So why wouldn't you want that option? Secondly, is this has a driver's package. It's called the Driver's Confidence Package 2. And what that includes is a lane departure warning with the ability to steer it inside your lane. It also has a anti-collision warning. So if you're approaching traffic too quickly or you're not really paying that much attention, it's going to flash these red lights and mute the stereo and basically give you this loud warning that you're approaching traffic like a maniac. Now let's talk about the stereo. This stereo sucks, and that's because of the interface. The upgraded Bose one has 2 knobs, one to tune and then one for volume. This one only has 1 knob for volume, so tuning becomes very difficult because I have to constantly press the skip button to go up and down throughout all the different stations on Sirius XM radio, for instance. So it becomes very difficult to use and very distracting, if you can't tell already. So what I would recommend is spending the extra couple $1,000s. Sounds like a lot, but really what it does is it gives you an ability to enjoy the car. You want to enjoy it. You need good tunes in a car, and this stereo sucks. It's also got this stupid touchscreen that looks like a iPad or a tablet, but it isn't. It's got this ugly background that I don't know if I can even change, but I've tried to find a way to change it and I can't. And basically it's got 6 icons on it. I have a huge screen for 6 icons. Useless. So really, upgrade. Do yourself a favor. Skip the RS package. Buy the full-on GPS system. I don't care about Android Auto and Apple CarPlay because you need a cell phone, and cell phones and cars don't mix. Keep it in your pocket. Use Bluetooth and enjoy your stereo. Let me turn on the climate control because I am just dying in here. It's 73 degrees outside on January 3rd here in Austin. I'm wearing shorts in January. What I want to talk about though is stuff like this. You're in the commute, it feels like the rat race. You're really in a small compact vehicle, relatively, where you can dart in and out of traffic, or at least weave through lanes, which are both technically against the law, but you know what I mean. Because it's so nimble, this thing is very easy to throw around, and it's very relaxing and comfortable at the same time. You really don't feel on edge like you do in the GTI. This doesn't have any of that sensation where you gotta constantly push it and go faster, harder, more. This is just chill. Why would you get a GTI if you're on a budget when you can have this? And the reason why I say that is because the cornering ability of this car, it's impossible to throw it out. To give you an example of what I mean about cornering, I have some camera gear in the passenger seat and nothing else really around to flop, but 40 miles an hour, 35. Understeer, but controllable. And there's my low fuel light. Those are GTI speeds. That's what I'm trying to get at. You're able to corner in this thing with no drama. Now, of course, I had cheap-ass Firestone tires on here, and I'd only imagine that if you went to a stickier tire, a more expensive tire, that you can do some remarkable things in here. Okay, I have another example coming up of cornering. So I have a right turn onto a street. This is a 50 mile an hour highway I'm on, and I'm just going to make a right turn. Slow down a little bit. 40. Man, it's just incredible. While I mentioned earlier the back seat in the Cruze has heated seats, the power windows are auto down, but none of them are auto up except for the driver. And we know that the Volkswagens are all auto up. I'm trying to think if there are any other differences here between a Golf and a Cruze hatchback. And beyond the power windows and the rear heated seats, they're very similar. But here we go. I'm ripping through traffic right now, and it's decent. Passing this sand truck that's spewing gravel all over the road for us, I can get around it easily. I'm not trapped in traffic, and I'm back in my open pocket of goodness. Plus, this car is unassuming, especially when you compare it to a GTI. This doesn't scream out for attention. It looks great, but at the same time, it's not racer boy look, and it's not racer boy sound either. As you'll notice in here, I've been flooring it, and you probably haven't even noticed. And that's because it just does its job. It does it very well, and it doesn't want any attention about it. It doesn't want a trophy. Oh man. I should also mention that the brakes in this Cruze are awesome. They are very responsive. You can modulate them perfectly, meaning that the same input you give on that pedal is the same response you're getting from the car. You don't have to bury your foot down to the floor in order to get any sort of braking. This thing is immediately responding to your touch on that pedal. A little tap, oh, your face falls off. Not really, but that's literally what can happen. If you pound your foot into this thing, it's going to slam to a stop. It'll stop on a dime and give you change. Now, we know in the GTI I actually achieved 33 mpgs on the highway. But in this car, in mixed driving, for an entire week, I've been averaging 32.6. My best fuel efficiency in this thing in the past 5 days has been 44.8 mpgs. And that's remarkable. So really, if you want a GTI but can't afford one, oh, I even have Bluetooth on the phone to the stereo. I'm going to decline that. Another thing about this stereo is that it actually doesn't send and receive text messages like the upgraded one. If you're like me and you don't want to ever touch your phone, like mine's in my pocket right now, this stereo is not as good for that. So, parents, remember that. Upgrade the stereo so the kid doesn't have to use their phone. Now back to what I was talking about. Oh yeah, fuel efficiency. If that really matters to you, then this beats the GTI hands down. It'll also beat the standard 1.8 Golf hands down. And that's because this automatically has more features than that Golf. Now this will cost more than the base 1.8 Golf, but at the same time, these things handle and ride the same way. Now as far as comfort in the Cruze, I feel much lower down in this car, and the car feels much lower down in general than the Golf, and that's any Golf. So if you really think that these days the Golf is riding a little too high, try the Cruze, because you feel like you're in a pancake. It's something I wouldn't hesitate to rent if I was traveling out of town, And it's not something I would be disappointed if my brother bought, or my mom, or my dad, because I understand that some people are on a budget. I'll give you a little secret. So when I do my car reviews, I don't bore you with the disc brake size, and I don't bore you with horsepower numbers, because literally that doesn't matter. The experience matters, and the enjoyment level matters, because the last thing you want is to be stuck with a Toyota Corolla. Am I right? Thanks for watching.